Guys, today we are going to convert a to-do list app to a Redux app. We can add to-do items to this list and check once the task is completed. I highly recommend you to check out the given video about how to build this to-do this app. So let's get dive into the code. So let's open the terminal and install three packages: Redux, react-redux and redux-thunk. So npm install redux, react-redux and redux-thunk. So Redux is actually an open source JavaScript library for managing the state of an application, and React Redux is a React binding for Redux library, and redux-thunk is a middleware which allow us to write action creators that returns a function instead of an action. So once installed, let's import provider from um, React Redux. So import from React Redux provider. Then wrap the provider with to-do list app. So provider, then close the provider. We need to give store as the argument or prop for the provider. So let's create a new folder Redux inside src. Inside Redux, create a file called store.js. Inside store, so let's rename it as store.js. Inside stores, we can create the store using create store from React Redux. So export const store equals create store, create store. Now the create store is imported from Redux, and create store receive three arguments. First one is the root reducer, and second one is the initial state, and third one is the middleware. Then export store, and in app.js import store from store.js, import from src redux store 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 equals store. Let's save it. Now it is working. Then we need to create two folders, reducers and actions. Reducers, actions. Inside actions, create action types. So create a file named types.js and create an action type, add a task, export const add a task equals add a task. Then let's create our first action, task actions.js. First import action types from types.js. import from types, add tasks, then create a function and export. So export function, name of the function is add task, and return function dispatch dispatch a function adding task, uh, adding task, and function adding task return type add task and payload as task. So receive task as an argument in add task and pass it to the adding task function and pass task as the payload. Then create our reducer task uh, .js. Inside the reducer, we create a task.js and first import action types. So import from action types add a task. Then export our default function. Uh, export. Before that, initialize our initial state. So const initial state equals task. First task will be empty. Then export our function. Export default function. Then two arguments. First is the initial state and second is the action. State equals initial state, comma action. Inside function, let's give a switch to identify the action. So it's switch of action type. First case is the add task. So case add task and return the previous state and add the new task to the task array. So tasks use the spread operator to get the previous state dot task comma action dot payload. So we will get the new task and append to this task array, and let's give the default state, that is return state. Then save it and create our root reducer. So index.js, um, we can combine the reducer using combine reducer function. Export default combine reducers and import our task reducer. Import from tasks. We created our root reducer, and then uh, we will go to this to-do list component. First import task actions uh, from actions. So import from redux actions task actions. The function is add a task. Then we need to import two functions from react redux, that is use selector and use dispatch. So import use selector use dispatch from react redux, and then const dispatch equals const dispatch equals use dispatch, and second one is the reducer. So let's use selector state is tasks, const tasks is equal to use selector state dot tasks. Let's console this tasks. We need to trigger the add task action inside save title. So just comment the old code and dispatch the action, dispatch add task, and the argument is the new task. For now, let's comment this line. Let's check on the developer console whether the state is accessible inside task component. So let's console.log state. No, it's undefined. So it is not accessible. So something went wrong. So we need to figure out this. go to store.js. Yeah, the first argument is empty here. We need to give the task reducer as the first parameter in store. So import task reducer from reducers. Import root reducer from reducers. Now let's check the debug console. As you can see, the task is there. Now go to uh, todolist.js and task state.task. The task is empty. So let's trigger the action to add a new task to this task array. So before that, we need to replace a data in flat list with the task.tasks, and then uncomment the action to add new task and replace new array with the task.task.length. Let's create a new task1, then save it. Yeah, we got the task inside flat list. We don't need this data constant, so let's remove it. So next is, when we once the task is completed, we can check the task. So for that, go to types.js and create a new type, export const delete task equal delete task, and go to task actions.js and import the action type delete task. Export function delete task. Delete task will receive the index as the parameter. Return function dispatch. Dispatch our function, that is deleting task. Function deleting task, return type is deleting task. The payload is the index. Payload delete task receive that index as argument and pass it is inside deleting task and pass it as a payload. Then go to the reducer. Inside the reducer, import delete task from types, and if the case is deleting task, so case delete task, return the new state, that is state. What here we are going to do is uh, we are changing this active property to false. Inside the task we have title, id and active. We have switched the active flag to its opposite. So new array action payload dot active to its opposite. If it is true, we will make it to false, and set the new state inside task. Then go to our component and import this action, delete task. Let's comment the existing code and dispatch deleting task, delete task. Inside delete task, pass the index as the parameter. Then let's create this action to add the title. So as you can see, we can add the titles here, and once checked, these titles also striked.